Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a very good breakfast. So, without much further ado, we would like to start this panel session for this morning. I would like to start our panel session. It is customary in Australia to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Turrbal and the Yugara people. I pay my respect to their elders, both past, present, and emerging, and recognize that this land have always been places of collaboration and learning. I also extend respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here today. Good morning. So today we had a very exciting panel session. It's called Parents in Tech. So they're leaving early to pick up their kids, and they'll be talking more about their experience and perspective on how to balance their from career and a family life. Just a few reminder, some few house rule for today. The exit is in your left side, just in case of emergency. Where you enter is where the exit is. But don't worry, because we have also our event staff here who will help you and guide you in case of emergency. I would like to introduce shortly myself. My name is Miriam Bautista. I'm a PhD student at the University of Technology, Sydney. I am also Filipinas in Computing Chair, which is part of the sisters community of Anita B. And yep, without much further ado, I would like to introduce our amazing moderator. Gretchen Scott is a National Business Development Manager at Coder Academy. Previously, she was a tech educator helping adults from a variety of backgrounds understand the intricacies of web development. Gretchen is a bootcamp survivor with a keen interest in the developing area of ethical AI who tends to wear Coder t-shirt most Wednesday. And today is Wednesday, so I reckon Gretchen got the t-shirt. So let's welcome, I'll give the floor to Gretchen. Let's give him a round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you. The Wednesday t-shirt thing was not actually planned today. That just lined up really well with my bio. Thanks for getting up and coming here. We really appreciate it. I had a glass too many last night, so it was a bit harder to wake up. So I guess once upon a time, life was really simple, right? Men went to work and most women stayed at home. And all the structures and systems around work were built on that assumption, right? You work 9 to 5, you stay late if you need to. No one needed to worry about the kids. And it's kind of changed. More women have entered the workforce. I've got 4 fabulous ones up here. But the systems haven't changed, and so we're all kind of walking around stuck in these issues and having the problems we talk to with our girlfriends, but no one else. So women leave tech careers, mid-career level, at double the rate of men. So 41% to 17%. That's our Harvard Business Review report. We don't know exactly why that is, although Lisa Harvey-Smith gave us a good rundown in her keynote speech. I think there's a fair assumption to make that when you start parenting, your tech career will take a hit. And that's because we don't have the systems and structures in place. So we've got 4 women here to talk about their experiences. They've all combined technology with parenting at different levels and in different ways. When I've concluded asking my questions that I've written and I'm quite proud of, I'm going to throw it to the floor for your questions. But along the way, I've got Slido set up because often I think of questions as I go. So just have to excuse me because these are my previous slides that are updated. So we're going to go all the way through them to here. So if you go to your phone, open any browser, and go to sly.do. You have to type it in perfectly because every other variation of that is actually a website. And it will autocorrect to sly.io, which is weird. So that event code, T961, will take you to our section for questions. So you can write your own questions in there, you can vote other people's questions, give them an up, down. If along the way you've got a question for a particular panellist, can you write their name in? That would make my life easier, and then I can direct it to that person. I can see everyone intently staring at the screen trying to type in the thing. They used this the other week in Melbourne when Jacinda Ardern was over from New Zealand. So I've totally just stolen their idea. I figure if it works for her, we're good. So while you're doing that, I'd like to introduce my panellists. So Lee Gibson, I could do it in the order of which you were sitting, that would be more helpful. Closest to me is Claire Pales. She is a best-selling author of The Secure CIO and a director of 27 Lanterns, which is a consulting company committed to helping organisations create and sustain effective information and cybersecurity teams. Sitting next to her is Lee Gibson. She is the tech area lead for internet banking, ATMs, CTRs and cash management at ANZ. And I don't know how all that fits on a business card ever. Lee studied software engineering and information systems at Griffith University, and she's had this globe-crossing career that's taken her to London to be on the organising committee for the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games. Christy Healy is an HR manager at Message Media. She's phenomenal in using her role to influence the technology sector. She organises great events at her organisation that promote diversity and inclusion, and she's worked very thoroughly to relook at their recruitment process and make sure it gets the candidates they need. And on the end of the panel is Gemma Lloyd. She has the most unique perspective today, as she has an 8-week-old baby at home. So thank you so much for coming. She is a CEO at Work 180, which is a company that she co-founded. Work 180 shares information around pay equity, flexible working conditions, paid parental leave and equal opportunities. And they also have some really great resources on their website around how to manage all those things in a practical sense. So all 4 of these organisations where our panellists work have really strong diversity and inclusion policies, but I'm just going to call myself out here on the fact that I haven't quite replicated that in my panel. I've managed to pull 4 Anglo-Saxon women and sit them there, but next time I will do better. So I'm going to go back a couple of slides so we can remember who we've got here. So all of these panellists are in the tech industry and all of them are mothers. So Lee, can I start with you? I'd like to hear some of your experiences and most memorable moments regarding motherhood and your tech career.
Hi everybody. I think one of the most recent ones actually was yesterday morning when I was getting ready to come here. So I got my bag organised, my husband got his bag organised for work. I got my 3-year-old dressed to pop in the car, and I was really busy. My husband grabbed all of our bags and said, "The bags are in the car," and I went, "Okay, great." Phoebes was in the car, she had her iPad set up. Yes, we let her have screen time in the car. And we went off to drop her off at daycare. When I started unpacking the bags, I realised that Phoebe's bag wasn't there. And I also looked at her feet, and yes, I'd got her socks on, but I had forgotten to pick up her shoes, because usually what we do is we put the shoes at the front door and everything just gets picked up and popped in. And Chris kind of looked at me, that's my husband, he looked at me and he went, "Oh, you forgot the bag." And I was like, hang on a second, you're an adult too. So, but even my daughter, she looked at me and she said, "Mummy, you need to remember my bag." And I was like, "Okay, thank you, sorry family." So it is my job to remember the bag. It's my job to remember my bag and her bag. And it's funny because my husband is absolutely awesome. He's really supportive and he does heaps with the kids. And that was, I think, just kind of a timely example for us some of this is just creating that awareness. Like Chris actually, he heard what she and what Phoebe and I had said, and he said, "Oh, yeah, okay, next time I'll look and I'll check for the bag as well." And he just hadn't thought about it. So it's lots of just really tiny things, like organising. We have an au pair at our home. So I work pretty long hours. I work full time. And we made a decision a few years ago to move out into the suburbs and to get a larger house. Not a huge house, but a larger house with an extra bedroom so that so someone could live with us, so to do the school pickups and drop-offs. Because I'm just not around to do that. I've got a team of 200 people who need lots of things. And my husband was finding his career was actually being affected because he was doing the drop-offs and pickups. So actually we had to work out. I'm interested in what all our other panellists say, because actually my husband changed jobs last year because he was becoming Mr. Dad at work. Because it was so unusual for a man to be leaving at 4 o'clock to go and pick up his son. And that's what I'm really passionate about, is what sort of social change can we make to actually make it easier for men to do some of this work without them being ostracised as well, because that's definitely what our family is seeing, is there's so many jobs that are only female jobs, And it's actually really hard for men to pick up the slack because then they get marginalised as well. And and we're actually talking just before about, how can we take this particular panel to some of the more male-dominated dev conferences. So I reckon we should pitch you out, but anyway, we'll chat later.
We should pitch out. So Claire, moving on from that, I was going to ask you exactly the same question about memorable moments.
Yeah, so I had to think about this. So for disclosure, I have 4 children. I can only claim 3 of those. I have a stepdaughter who's 5. And for me, some of my most memorable moments haven't been very positive. And I think being a parent and being female is really hard because it's always a juggling act. And I think it's actually a juggling act for men as well. It's just maybe the constructs around them are slightly different and the way they're judged is slightly different. And I'm very fortunate. I've had 2 husbands, both of whom have been very active fathers. So my first husband was a stay-at-home dad, and we lived in Hong Kong. And I woke up one day and realised that I was missing my children's upbringing because I was working kind of 8 days a week as a head of security. In a regional role, I had 4 countries to look after, and my career was going like this, but my home life was kind of going like this. And so I moved back to Australia to have a bit of grass, but also to have a bit more balance. And I think, I hope my children haven't been affected too much by the fact that I wasn't around, but I do reflect on that as a very memorable moment, very visceral memory, waking up that day in Hong Kong and thinking, this is not right, like this doesn't feel right. Flash forward, that was when I had 2 kids, now I've got 4. And my husband and I both work 3 days a week. And just on something that Lee said, my husband works in a C-level position, and when he approached HR, when he got the job, he said, I only want to work 3 days a week. And they said, oh, no, that's not going to work. And they were surprised and delighted that a man would want to do that. But at the same time, the last 2 years he's been under a lot of pressure because his boss is of the old guard who believes that people should be there face-to-face with you every day in order to get their job done. And I think we were talking over breakfast that we kind of need to move to a model where it's much more outcome-focused rather than I can see you and therefore you're delivering. And so for him, it's a very tough, awakening to see how women have been putting up with things like this for many, many years. And he and I are very committed to being around for the kids. And, I had a live-in nanny in Hong Kong and I hated it. It's not for everybody. Some people can manage it. We didn't enjoy it. And for us now, with 4 kids, we have to have military precision around what happens at what times. And, I read a book about time management once, and the one thing I took out of it was to insource some tasks. So my 10-year-old and my 8-year-old have jobs to do every day. One makes the breakfast, one makes the school lunches, and they chip in and do their bit as well. I think they're old enough to do that, and that takes a bit of the pressure off the parents, I think. But
it's a great idea.
It is
insourcing.
Yeah, the book's called. The book is by Kate Christie, if anybody wants to look it up. She's my business coach as well, just a bit of a plug for her. But it's a really good book if you need time management, but that was kind of the key thing I took out of it, was to get the kids to do stuff. But at the end of the day, for us to work 3 days a week each, we have to say no to things. So normally I wouldn't be here on a Wednesday because this is normally my day at home with the kids. But given the topic, I really wanted to be here. But we had to move mountains in order for me to fly into Brisbane last night to be here. So, it was just the epitome of working parent to mix things up to make it work, yeah.
We had a fabulous breakfast together this morning, and it was just sprinkled with phone calls from the babysitter's bailed to I'm sick to what's happening, and all of us at different times kind of checked out of breakfast to sort out life back home. I like what you said, Claire, around men recognising that it takes some form of career hit when you ask for these things you need to be a parent. So in the UK, less than 5% of those people eligible for paternity leave take it. The reason that men give for this is that it's frowned upon and they think it demonstrates a lack of commitment to their career. And they're not wrong, right? Like, we've all experienced it. The fear is justified. So I think we've all taken time out of the workforce or you work shorter hours and it is judged and opportunities are taken from you or just kind of shifted sideways because of that. So Gemma, I mean, you're the most recent person I know to have maternity leave of any sort. How are you managing it? Is your partner taking paternity leave? Can you tell me what's happening?
Yeah, sure. So my partner was actually a freelancer, and he used to travel a lot. So he was always he's a videographer. He used to do commercials for LA. He got invited to do a Netflix series and such. And when we decided, sorry, I say decided, but when I fell pregnant, he made the decision that he wanted to be around and be supportive and take on much of the primary caring role. So he actually became, luckily for us, we do a lot of video content for my company. So he actually became employed by Work180. So we're very, very fortunate because he works 3 days a week. Over the 8 weeks that we've had little Charlie, I have actually gone back to work by choice. I was very much entitled to pay parental leave, but I actually found myself sitting there in between his feeds going, I'm really bored and I don't know what to do, and the Wiggles is driving me insane. So I was checking my emails and I was just like, look, I just want to go back to work. So between the both of us over the last few weeks, because we work flexibly, we just sort of, okay, I've got stuff to do, here you go. Okay, now I have stuff to do, here you go. So it kind of just works and it's just happened like that. But I think the situation we're in is probably very different, and he has taken a career hit so that I can continue with my career.
What do you think around government policy with regards to parental leave and paid parental leave?
Yeah, so I think the government definitely needs to do more, absolutely. So at the moment, in Australia, it's obviously 18 weeks minimum wage for maternity leave, and for a father, it's 2. That in itself incentivises the fact that it's women that then go and look after the child, and men should be going back to work. If we look at countries like those Nordic countries in Europe, a few of them actually have equal amounts of paid parental leave. So men and women are legislated to take equal amounts. As such, you have countries like Iceland, which have the lowest gender gap in the world. It's setting the scene, by doing that men and women are equal, and they're equal at home and they're equal at work. So it's really got to be driven by government. The good thing is, though, I think what we're starting to see, that despite the government being lacklustre in this regard, private sector is driving change. So we've got companies like Work180, and we offer men and women equal amounts of primary and secondary carers leave. So it's 8 weeks paid for both, and we're only a size of 30 staff, but we invest in that. We also have no minimum tenure to take parental leave, so you can join 9 months pregnant, you would get access to that leave straight away. You've got companies like Zendesk, which is a tech company. They've got 16 weeks paid 16 weeks paid secondary carer leave. So as a man, they have that entitlement, or a woman, but typically it's a man, obviously, that's classed as secondary carer, and 21 weeks for primary. So we're starting to see that change in private sector, but certainly there's a long way to go. Yeah.
So much, so far to go. Kirsty, I'd like to talk to you. You work in a tech company that's results driven, right? Things have to be delivered.
Yep.
But also you've got children, and sometimes you need to leave work before 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. When you leave, do you say, I'm going to pick up my children? Or is it one of those, I've got a doctor's appointment, and kind of keeping the children or your parenting responsibilities a bit hidden?
Yeah. So I'm really lucky. I've got a 2 and 4-year-old at home, and when I moved into this role, I was really honest around wanting to be there for my kids and what time I wanted to be there. So 2 days I start at 7:30 and leave at 3:30, which means I can pick up my kids from childcare, and I work a 4-day week. And then my husband spoke to his work around alternating his hours as well. So one of the things, and I had a really great mentor whilst I was pregnant with my first child, was set the expectations from the beginning. Manage your stakeholders so they know that you can't do meetings, to make sure that you're confident. So when you're walking out the door, it's, I'm going to pick up my kids and you don't have to lie. Message Media, we introduced last year a policy which is called an alternative work policy, and the purpose of that was to start to get people to work flexibly, purchase leave, and have more autonomy around the way that they work. So that was for everyone in the organisation. So it meant whether you're going to do sports, whether you're going to pick up your kids, you can leave early and be really proud that you've got that work-life blend, which is really important.
I like that. So Lee, you've talked about you work really long hours and your husband was the one picking up the kids. Did he feel like he could be honest, saying I'm picking up the kids, or did he used to hide it a bit as well?
I think he hides it now.
Yeah, because he's learnt.
So that was a learning from the previous organisation he was in, because he was quite open and honest of leaving at 4, and saying I'm going to go and pick up my kids, and then he became Mr. Dad at work. So now he's a little bit less candid in his new workplace, but he still tells people what he's doing. I've definitely adjusted my work hours though. So ANZ has really flexible work policies too. So they have 18 weeks paid maternity leave, and you can have 3 months paternity leave as well when the child's under 3. And also ANZ, they have a really great flexible working policy. So I only work, from probably 9:30 till 5 in the office. I do work really long hours late at night. So after the kids get to bed, I'll log on and I'll, get the rest of whatever was happening that day done. And sometimes I don't work at all at night time. It just really depends on what's happening. It's whatever's appropriate. But I'm able to balance that, which is really nice. And we work a lot more from home as well. So we can have people who will just log in from home if there's something happening, or if I need to pop into my son's. Sometimes my son got a Star of the Week last year at school, and he was really excited because he gets to stand up in front of everyone, and he really wanted me to be there. And so I worked from home in the morning, and then I popped along to school and I saw him and got to take some photos and got to spend that time, and that was really great quality time for him. And so now this year I'm actually proactively taking that time, and spending time doing the school drop-offs and pickups, and I actually do have full support of my boss.
That's great.
Which is really great. There are some people who still want to see people in the office really long hours and feel that that's dedication, but I think some of that is changing. Definitely at ANZ that's changing, and I kind of, even though it was a little bit scary for me at first, I thought, well, I'm one of the bosses, so if I'm doing it, then that kind of shows that everyone else that they're allowed to do it too. So I've kind of taken that bit of leap of faith, and everyone else does that too now. And so within our team, they're pretty happy doing it, and we're really supportive of that. And actually nobody really seems to... I was nervous that there would be some people who just take it really far and just never show up anymore and not get the outcomes that they're supposed to get. But actually... everybody has been really great with it, and I actually don't know of anybody in our team who has taken it too far.
I think that shift to content-driven or output-driven results as opposed to presenteeism is really important. I like seeing that happen.
Yeah. Sorry, Gretchen. And can I also say, since we introduced the policy, so these policies, it's a huge benefit to an organisation. Our engagement score on work-life blend year on year went up 16%. So the conversations and the view for both females and males and that flexibility has really started to shift. And it's got huge benefits for a business because it helps us retain people, get talent in the door as well. So it's not only benefit the employees, but also the business as well, and the output that they're getting from happy and engaged employees.
And in tech companies, in Melbourne at the moment, everyone's fighting for anyone who can write good code, so that's so important. Yep. I was actually going to direct the next question to you, Christy, around so much of the unseen opportunities occur, with after-work drinks or at a meet-up. How do you manage that if you have to go home and have kids? Do you think look after the kids?
Yeah.
Has that impacted your career progression?
It's definitely hard, so I don't think it's impacted my career progression, but it's been stressful. So, if I'm working from home, having to do drop-off, get out the door without having some form of food on me and going to an event in the city, and just changing my hours or getting sitters. So it's not as easy as just being at work, walking out the door and going for a drink. in regards to, I guess, things that we're trying to do different in our workplaces, we really notice that workplaces are so diverse these days. So what else can we do? We have Friday night drinks, but it's also about morning teas and events. So really trying to think of how we change the way that people can engage in our business. Everyone has equal opportunity, and it's really important for businesses to consider that and to think about what they're doing for their people. It shouldn't just be drinks.
Can I just mention that too? When we were talking about the questions, I didn't think that this question was pertained to me because I run my own business. But thinking about it as someone who does run a business, I find it really hard to go to evening networking events. So not just working for a larger organisation and having events of an evening, but there's a lot of networking that goes on after 5 o'clock, and it's very hard as a business owner and someone who tries to meet as many people in cybersecurity industry as I can. That impacts me, I think, in being able to broaden my network and get my business known and speak to people, because I limit myself to more lunches and morning teas and daytime events. And so the people who limit themselves to the nighttime ones, maybe we will be like ships in the night and I won't get to meet those people. So the pre-planning that goes into getting out of an evening means I have to see something well in advance and work out how I'm going to... And then it often will cost me money in a nanny or in a babysitter in order to be able to go to these events. And, yeah, it's sort of a catch-22.
It is tricky. Gemma, you're doing this combining of parenting and working and sharing responsibilities with your partner. Have you got any tips on that division of unpaid labour and how to make that work?
Oh, that's
a big one.
I have just a really good partner, and we've never actually sat down and had a conversation around you do this and I do that, to be honest. It just happens, magically works. But however, aside from my own personal experiences, recognising that we're probably somewhat of an edge case, we do have on the Work 180 site, a downloadable checklist, and it's actually for you and your partner to complete around what jobs you do, what jobs they do, and that includes at-home work and also how many hours you work and such. And so it allows you to go through, and then at the end you can kind of go, hey, look, did you know I also work full time, and look at how much I'm doing around the house as well. And it's sort of it also gives tips on how to bring up that conversation with your partner as well, so it's not attacky and look at all the things I do and you don't do anything. It's just it makes it an easy way to have a conversation so you can see that split.
There is we had a conversation in the taxi on the way here as well about how much of your brain is filled with the birthday presents. Have you got the shoes? Are you going to the school activity? Lee, would you like to expand on that a little bit?
Really?
We had a solid conversation on this.
No, there's so much mental load that goes into all the extra parts of your life. So in my husband's family, it is the wife who organises all of the family birthday presents, and even my mother-in-law's birthday, I have to buy the card, I have to get the present. We had a discussion about this probably 1 or 2 years into our marriage, because I didn't realise, because when I grew up, my dad's actually really autonomous and he does his own things, and so he would always organise my mum's present. But we had the chat, and Chris just sort of said, look, this is something I feel strongly about and I'd really appreciate your support with. And I'm like, okay, so on our checklist, I buy the presents for all of our extended family, and I do all the cards and the things. And now that I know that's fine, but it's something we had to talk about. And sometimes I'd completely drop the ball. If there's been something really big at work, and if I've already done a 60 or 70 hour week at work, sometimes I'm going to forget a really important family member's birthday, and that's going to happen. And I've said that to Chris, and he's like, okay. So, and sometimes I'll have the conversation. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? But
I think it's the truth of trying to juggle all the things, and it goes back to balancing and sharing some of that unpaid labour equally among the children and the husbands and everyone else.
Yeah, well, it's tricky too when you have two people who both work full time, and so my husband works full time and I work full time, and having an au pair really has worked for us. because it means that when we both get home, we can have quality time with the kids, and someone else has done some of the boring stuff. So they do the nagging on the homework, and they kind of get the kids through the bath, because our kids they don't like to transition through. So some of that is just really hard.
We had a great audience question that ties into this around, what about the cost of childcare? I mean, I feel like we've all been a bit lucky in this conversation. We've had other other help and other support.
Yeah.
Would one of you like to talk to the barriers around childcare and maybe what changes could happen? Or should I be more specific? Christy, I'm picking on you.
So my, I guess, situation is, so I work 4 days a week. And funnily enough, my husband now works a 9-day fortnight and had some big challenges at his organisation around, a man and 9-day fortnight and wanting to be there for the kids. So he's sort of gone through all of that as well. We do 3 days care, so childcare for our 2 kids. And it was just planning, so working out at the start of the year, what's our salaries, what does that look like, how comfortable are we with how many days our child's in care. It's not just about money, but it's about, as a parent, how your parenting style and how you want to do that. And then we're fortunate enough, so what support do you have as well? So my parents have been heavily involved and they pick up a day. It's so challenging, obviously, when you've got sick kids, and that adds a whole nother layer to the conversation. So it's really just about the pre-planning, sit down with your partner or sit down with, yourself, if it's just yourself, and work out, what's practical, what can I afford, because it's just different for everyone. But it's just, I think that pre-planning is really important.
So let's say for a moment you can't afford childcare and you do have a longer period out of work than you'd planned. Christy, you're in HR, so this is coming back to you. Would you have any pointers on how to then maintain some tech relevance and get back into the industry after a period of time out?
Yeah. So probably the one thing is networking. So going to meetups or going to places where you can meet people in the industry, if you can obviously get support or care from family or friends to get yourself out there. I think looking at different programs, a lot of the tech organisations have some really great programs. We were talking about ANZ this morning in regards to some programs, and you might be able to talk more to it about getting women back into the workplace once they've had kids, mid-career. I certainly went back to study, later as well. So I went back as an older student to study. So I think, just trying to build up your networks, get a mentor or ask somebody from a mentor in the industry if you can reach out to somebody, and start to do it that way and look at what programs some of the organisations have.
There's some really great reskilling programs. So yes, ANZ has done a reskilling program where we actually worked with Coder Academy.
This wasn't planted as a plug, actually.
Bit of a shout out. And that was incredibly successful. And there's 2 people in my team who were reskilled through that program. They worked in tech and their skills had kind of gotten a bit out of date. So just having that refresher was really good. MYOB also have a really great program called Develop Her. And I think there's quite a few other,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a Message Media one, but actually it's really useful just to refresh, and even for people who have been working in tech for a really long time. So I've worked in tech for 23 years, and the languages I learned at uni, no one uses anymore. I guess Java, but it's really useful. Yeah. Java was really new when I was at uni. I actually did use 1.0. True story. Yeah, it was good. Otherwise it would have been Pascal, and you guys probably don't even know what that is. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway, there are some really great programs, and definitely reaching out into meet-up areas is a great way of reskilling and meeting some really interesting people.
So stalk everyone on LinkedIn later.
I'd just add to that too that the networking thing I think is incredibly important. And when I took mat leave 18 months ago for my youngest child, I kept the networking up as much as I could. And where appropriate, I actually took him with me to meet people. And I just said to them, I've got a really tiny baby, and would you mind if I brought him with me so that we can have so I can be part of this conversation? And on International Women's Day, I took him to a lunch at the Grand Hyatt, and my husband pushed him around the park for an hour so I could eat, and then brought him back to me, and I just stood up the back and rocked him in the pram while I watched the presenter. And look, not everyone can do that because it would just get a bit congested, but I would encourage people to keep networking even if you're on mat leave or trying to return to work. And I think just be honest. It's, you know, the same we were talking about earlier, you know, not sneaking out at 4 o'clock saying you're going somewhere else. But if you're honest, it kind of takes the stress out of it. Yeah. And I mean, I probably wouldn't take him with me now because he's 18 months and he would just be getting into everything. But when they're tiny, you know, it's a bit like Gemma with an 8-week-old baby. They can just sit there and sleep, or you feed them, or you can just prop them on your shoulder and continue the conversation, because if we do that, then it just becomes normalised and yeah, like we don't want to, I'm running your own business or being a CEO, you might not want to stop working, but you want to be there with your child as well, yeah.
I love that around normalising parenting, because it's such a normal part of our broader society, and we kind of still don't. For some reason.
And actually there are quite a few meetups now which have childcare included.
Yeah,
so I know Google now, whenever they sponsor a meetup, when they sponsor it, part of it is they usually there has to be a provision of childcare if it's needed, and you can kind of nominate. And there's quite a few conferences also will actually provide childcare or even sponsor membership if you're female, and if you have a family, you can actually apply and get free childcare. So it's something worth looking into.
I love that it's happening, and it's getting bigger and bigger.
Yep, there's a bit of change coming.
There is a change. So women have been working so hard to be mothers, you know, not just mothers, but everyone puts this pressure on themselves, right? We want to be great mothers, we want to be great employees, we want to be great business owners. We seem to do all the roles. Claire, what do you reckon needs to change culturally for it to be easier?
Well, we were discussing this again over breakfast, and I think part of it is just like downing tools and walking away. You know, just allowing older children and partners, male or female, to fend for themselves sometimes. And, you know, maybe if you forget a gift every now and then, like, yeah, the sky won't fall, but yeah, it is going to happen. But I also think there are a lot of generational issues that over time, unfortunately, we may just have to wait for some of the older generations to retire, because they're not going to change their ways, and they have a particular view about how business needs to operate. And unfortunately, globally, there are many, many men and women who see a particular way of doing work, and that is fronting up and doing it. And, you know, I love the idea that some workplaces don't have a limit on, you know, you have to be here 12 months to take maternity or paternity leave. Not everybody can plan when they fall pregnant. Some people are just lucky enough for it to happen. And so I think if we can take some of those boundaries away, that would be helpful. I think the government, there is more they can do, but I was happy to see that when I took the paid parenting leave, that they allowed me to dip back into my business every now and then without penalising me, because if I took 6 months off and left my business, it would die. So, you know, things like that, just being accommodating, because parenting is not a structure or a framework or a book that you can follow. It's, you know, kids get sick and parents get sick, and, you know, I think just relaxing a little bit around the structures and testing to see what works as well. Yeah, that was
another audience question that's just come through around, what do you do when a kid gets sick? How do you manage that? So I see Lee smiling.
Good luck. Good luck.
Do you want to talk to that? And I'd also like to hear Christy's thoughts on sick children as well. She's had a rough couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's been my life for the last 4 weeks.
It's hard. It's hard sometimes. So when kids are sick, you can't take them to childcare, and that is absolutely the right thing to do. You shouldn't be taking your children to childcare. You have to just take the time out, and that's fine. And if you're a business owner and you've got a really big meeting that day or something, when I had my first son, I was a business owner and I got 0 maternity leave. So I literally had my son, had 2 weeks off. My mum actually came and lived with us for 5 months, and she was amazing, because when my son got sick, there was nothing that I could do. And I couldn't afford childcare, and there was no government subsidy. So actually, if there's anyone in the government here, please do create subsidies for female founders of businesses, because that just does not exist. And also, if you're a female founder and you're not paying yourself enough money, and you apply for any of the what's it called? The
Paid parental leave.
paid parental leave. If you have not got a 3-month history of paying yourself a certain thing, you cannot even get the minimum wage. So actually, as a business owner, I got 0 from the government, and I was still paying taxes and paying BAS. So
That's what I mean about flexibility. Like, they have to recognise that not everybody fits in the box.
yeah, it's tricky. Sorry, over to you, Christy.
Sickness. So because I'm 4 days a week, my husband and I sat down and had a good conversation around how we would manage that. When I went back to work, I was really worried that those kinds of things would fall back on me, him working full time, and he would just assume that I would pick that up, and that was one of my key worries. So one of the good things that we did was have a conversation really early on around I'm going back to work, what does that look like, how to pick up drop-offs, work, what does it mean when the kids are sick, and we decided that we would just take it in turns to make it fair. So it wasn't always me, I work part-time, but I understood that obviously he's in a busy job as well. So being really transparent from the start, I think, has made it easier for us. So a perfect example is the last 4 weeks we've had croup and conjunctivitis and everything that you could possibly imagine. And then so in those circumstances, it's stressful because obviously you want to perform at work, but at the end of the day, you know, you just have to remind yourself not to be hard on yourself. It's so hard not to be. But you're a parent, you need to be there for your kids. And when you can't be, you know, leverage people in your network. So it might be your mother's group, it might be, for myself, grandparents, friends. Just think about who in your network and your community, and really build up your community that can support you on a personal front as well.
I like that.
Yeah, I guess it's hard for many people because they work for employers that actually aren't that supportive, and it's quite nerve-wracking you can have all the conversations at home, you know, in the world, but it still won't impact how your employer is supporting you to be able to work flexibly or manage anything with your partner. So as as an employer, I guess from that perspective, some of the things that we are genuinely flexible at Work 180. So, one good example is our head of BD last week. She works 4 days a week. She gets paid for 5 because she does compressed hours. But her child was off sick, so she had chicken pox. She sent me a message in the morning saying, "Hey, Ollie's got chicken pox. I'm gonna be at home. I'm not gonna work." Then later on, she pops back online and goes, "Actually, he's watching TV. I'm fine to start working again." No worries. Don't bother putting in a sick day. Like, it's all good. I trust you. I know that you're going to get the work done, whether she came on. And we have a thing on our Slack channel called Leave Tracker, and people are like, just popping out to grab the kids, or I'm going out for the morning to do X, Y, Z, and it's all fine. It's genuinely outcomes driven, and we have a lot of engagement, a lot of productivity. At the end of the day, if a person that works for you isn't going to do the right thing, then whether you're in an office or you're at home or whatever the case is, they're still not going to do the right thing, guaranteed. So flexible working isn't a reward, it just should be the way that things
So if you're
are.
not at a flexible, like, you sound amazing. I'd love to come and work there. Although
We're
actually
hiring,
we're really
in
good
case you
too.
couldn't tell.
We are very flexible as well, I should say. How do you go about advocating to work somewhere, like to change the structures in your workplace? If I'm somewhere that's not into that and doesn't value it, have you got any tips for how to push for that?
Well, the first thing is, so actually on our whole website is got about, over 100 employers where you can actually click on them and you can see what policies they have to offer. So if you're in the job search period, you can see, do they have paid parental leave? Do they support flexible working? Do they have minimum tenure? Do they support equal pay? All the rest of it. So that's the first thing you can do, is do your research. And the funny thing is, a lot of internal employees actually do their research on our website because employers don't publish it externally. Then what we do is we also encourage employers to be really vocal around the policies and benefits they have to offer. What's on your intranet? How are they promoting these things? Are they sharing stories, if it's a big organisation, of men working flexibly as well as women? Trying to break down those sort of cultures. I met with the managing partner of McKinsey a couple of months ago, and he said our biggest challenge is our male staff won't work flexibly. They have an alpha male type of attitude which they've always been used to. So it's sharing those stories when some try and break down that. But so do your research first, and then use and go to them with the solution and say, I want to work flexibly. This is how I see it working for the company, the team, and then for me. So think through all of those things. Take the pressure off your manager or off your leader for having to work this out in their head. And I think a lot of the times if you can do that, then it's fine. And I don't think managers are actually supported enough around how flexible working may work. It can be scary. How am I going to support this team not in the office? How do I know they're doing my work? So employees need to train their managers as well.
Management training in reverse. I like it. Lee, there's a question directed to you, and I quite like this one. It goes, isn't it the men's turn to suck up that position as Mr. Dad? Women with kids are labelled mothers as soon as they give birth.
I totally agree. The cultural change takes time.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot longer for all this change to happen. And I think at ANZ it actually is happening. So we have a lot of men taking parental leave. We have a Slack channel as well, which is, where are you today? And there's heaps of guys dropping off their kids to school. There's heaps of guys going and going to see their kids play sport and being quite open about it, which is, I think, really encouraging. However, at the bank, we've got 40,000 employees. Our tribe, so we're tribal now. We have squads and chapters and so we've got a really large tribe. Our tribe is a different culture to other tribes. So our tribe is actually very family focused, and we do lunches where we'll share food, and we have everyone will bring in food from their homeland, and we're quite multicultural and quite a diverse team. So actually, if we ever do this panel again, I've got heaps of women engineers who would absolutely love to be part of this, who are parents as well. So we're kind of the family tribe. And so a lot of men come to our tribe because they value their family and they want that experience at their work. There are other tribes we've got a bro tribe. We've got a tribe who are, play hard, party hard, and they are out every Friday night, and they love putting on their Slack channel all the boozy exploits over the weekend. And that's cool, because then that attracts that people who want that. And I think that's fine, that's okay. But it is kind of interesting to see how culture plays out. And what we found, over the last year is that by trusting everyone more, by providing the flexible work environment, a lot of people feel really loyal, and they work so hard and they get such great outcomes because they know that we trust them, and they know that they can work however they want and however they see fit. And we've had just some amazing results this year in terms of outcomes, and I think that's really interesting then to provide to our other senior leadership. It
sounds like the Jacinda Ardern model of leadership. I like it. It's welcoming. Claire, flexible working's great, right? This is an audience question also. How do you manage to switch off when you get home and be present with the children when you know your phone's still beeping?
It's very hard to switch off, especially because I run a business. So I try really hard to make commitments with my kids so that I'm not on the phone. So, they have particular TV shows that they like to watch with me, or I sit down with my 8-year-old and do his reading with him. I try to commit that time, or I go somewhere with the little one so that I'm with him and I'm sort of present. Because if I just wander around the house, then my phone's always there to look at. The other challenging thing too is getting enough sleep. So once the children are in bed, it's really hard for me then to not pick up my phone or grab my laptop and log back on and work, especially with the little one. Sometimes he still wakes in the night. If I'm not asleep by 10 o'clock, I may not get to sleep till 2. So I have to really think about, okay, do I open the laptop or just go to bed? Often I will go to bed and I'll get up at 5 and do a couple of hours work before the house is awake. So there's a lot of sacrifices, and I sacrifice a lot of sleep at the moment in order to balance it. But I think it also comes down to making sure that I'm just doing what's essential. And so I could sit and read emails all day and scroll articles and connect with people on LinkedIn. I could do that 24 hours a day, but really limiting it down to what is essential for me to do right now and what is not, so that I can spend the time with the children.
I like that. So, Christy, you touched on this briefly. How do you drive culture in a flexible work environment? So what actionable pointers would you have for us if all our teams are remote and we only see them, one day every 2 weeks in person?
So one of the things that we've been coaching our leaders on and really working hard on is just the way that they communicate with their employees. So the whole premise of alternative work and working flexibly is really making sure that leaders are having good communication with their employees, so good conversations. We want employees to really understand why are they there, what are their goals, and what impact are they having on the business. So it really empowers them to know I can work flexibly, but it's a good relationship with their manager in regards to, you know what you're working on, I'm seeing the results, it's driving the business forward, and you're getting flexibility. So I think, it has to work both ways as well in order for it to work. And we've found that through better communication and conversations between leaders and employees, that's been really effective in driving and the success, I think, of flexible work in our business.
Seems to always come back to leadership in this. I like it. There's been a lot of talk around, or a couple of questions on here around travel and how do you manage that? So here we all are, who's looking after the kids and who's cooking the meals? How do you negotiate who goes away and who picks up the other jobs?
I bring mine with me. We're all going to the UK in September because we launched over there last year, and I can't be longer than a month without my little one, so I was like, okay, everyone's coming to the UK. But with small little trips, so we recently had our team conference at the Gold Coast, and that was 2 days. That was my first night away from my little one. And any employers out there, make sure you book conference facilities with breastfeeding facilities, by the way. Yeah, I feel like I need to write a blog on this because it was me and another lady who works for us that was breastfeeding, and we had to find a room with no windows that was lockable. Couldn't find one. We got in a shed miles away. It was, and interesting considering the business that I run. But anyway, but then we just, so for that, my mum came over and babysat. We've got a shared calendar now, so when he has to travel for a night or two away, that I'll make sure that I'm at home. And it's just really good communication, I think, at the end of the day. And if you're lucky enough to have family support around you, then that obviously helps.
Yeah. It's not always easy though. So
I can't wait. I feel like everything's so easy at 8 weeks, and you've got all these stories, and I'm like, oh my god.
We might catch up later. Yeah. Oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. They grow up. So this trip has been booked in, and it's been in our diaries for 3 months, I think. So this has all been locked and loaded. I've got an unexpected trip to India next week. It popped up in my diary last Wednesday. Don't need to know the background, but I'll be in India for 6 days to meet with the team and a whole heap of people. And it was completely unexpected. I can't get out of it. I did suggest doing a VC. We have tech. We've got teams in 4 different locations in India. Talk to them every day, all the time. But this is a very special meeting where we've got to go, show how important something is to somebody, and we have to be present and spend time on a plane to show how important this thing is. And my kids are kind of saying, "Well, Mummy, why are you going to be away for a whole week?" And it's really hard to explain that to a 3-year-old. And my husband's usually super supportive, but this time he was just kind of like, my 3-year-old, she loves me at the moment, and she at the moment, with kids, it changes all the time. It changes all the time, but at the moment she's a little bit obsessed with me. And so Chris is sort of just going, well, how is this going to work? Because I'm going to have, he was looking down the barrel of having a 3-year-old running around the house looking for mummy, this has happened before, and she looks in the cupboards, she goes she'll look under the table, and that's what she'll do for the next week. And that's going to be really hard.
And
so we're going to do lots of VCs. Yeah, and she's not sleeping very well. But just in the last couple of days, so I started talking to her and planting some seeds and trying to get her onto the daddy train for the week. Trying to be really strategic. These are things we can talk about.
Planning.
Yeah, it's hard though.
When I was living in Asia, I travelled a little bit, and my eldest son at the time was about 3, and when I travelled, I used to always bring him home a Thomas train, a little metal Thomas train. And one day I realised how big the bucket of Thomas trains was getting, and I stopped doing it because I thought this is going to be a visual cue for him about how often I go away. And you know, I don't think that it ever gets easier, because even now, like I was FaceTiming the kids this morning, and he's nearly 11, and you know, they still look down the barrel of the camera at you, and it kind of hits you right here. So I think travel is really hard, and planning in advance. Like for me to go away for 6 days next week would be practically impossible. I don't live close to my family at all, and I don't have my mum, so I rely on paid carers. And fortunately for us, we can afford it to an extent, but sometimes we just have to say no to things. And we don't leave the kids with carers overnight, so so we just have to say no sometimes. And for me, you know, that might be a business opportunity that's missed. But for my husband, sometimes he has to tell the government that he's not going to be at a meeting, and, you know, you just have to suck that up.
But I think we've talked a lot about techs are really flexible. It offers itself to being flexible, right? But a lot of things need to change. And a lot of that, in my mind, is around we need to normalise parenting as part of who we are as people in the world. So we need to stop hiding it. We need for it to be fixed and for work to be easier for people, we just need to be more open about it. So if we had a couple of takeaways today, because it's that kind of time, I'm getting the smile, I think we need to keep the emphasis on outputs as opposed to presenteeism, which has been talked to a few times. I think that sharing unpaid work around everyone, even the children, that needs to become a real thing. There needs to be recognition. And we need to stop the secret parenting. We have to talk open about parenting and childcare and the challenges. So if work expectations and structures can change to accommodate that, then not only can women go to work easier, but men can also parent easier. And I think that would just be the win-win, right? So I'd like to thank my panel for all organising the childcare and coming. Thank you so much.
And so we have a little gift for our moderator and our panel. So thank you so much to our panel and speakers, and for our audience for your time and coming over for our session today. Thank you so much. If you have any question, feel free to see our speaker after the session. Thank you.